First, welcome and thank you for joining me this morning for this announcement. I want to recognize the legislators that are here. Very grateful for your support, interest, and really close scrutiny of all the issues surrounding our youth services and the important function of government. So I want to express my thanks to the General Assembly members, both House and Senate, that are here. Whenever you look at the responsibilities of government, we know that I have focused on our foster care, those children that are assigned to the state for care, but we also have to look at the youth services, those young people that have also been assigned to the state for care, rehabilitation, education, and those services. And so that has to receive a lot of attention as well. There's not a more important responsibility that we have than to properly take care of those that are assigned to us by the court system. The Division of Youth Services for 20 years prior to this last January operated the facilities through private contractors. As you know, in January 1 of this year, I directed the Department of Human Services through DYS to take over operation of 7 of the 8 facilities. This was done because of legislative failure to properly review or to review the contracts favorably. Secondly, it was done so that DHS could get a better handle on the services that are delivered, not just in an oversight role, but in a more detailed fashion, so that we could determine and make recommendations to in regard to the future and how those services would be delivered. I want to applaud Director Gooman, Director Keisa Smith, and Director Gillespie for the work that they have done in providing these services over the last 7 months. They've done an extraordinary job, and all of the staff has worked very diligently, and they have improved services during that time. They've improved the mental health services available for the young people. They've improved education. They looked at it, and it was not uniform. The kids were all still with a possibility of getting further behind, and so they enhanced the education services. They also engage with families to a greater extent, to have more family support. So they've done great work through DYS in the delivery of the services for our young people. Today, they have submitted to me a DYS action plan that is lengthy, it is detailed, it is substantive, and I applaud this review, and I am today accepting this report from them and making 3 or 4 announcements in regard to action items that we will now undertake. First of all, we will be conducting a security audit of all of the facilities. This will be done through Brian Marr, the Director of Security at DHS, who is former Secret Service. He will be doing a facility review of all of the facilities. He's most recently done the Alexander facility. And based upon that, we will make any changes that are needed to assure the safety, well-being of the youth that are housed in these different facilities. We will secondly conduct an independent review of DYS. As you'll remember, we early on in my administration had an independent review conducted by Paul Vincent out of Alabama for child services. He, after a thorough review, made 11 recommendations for us to work on, and I wanted to have a similar review being conducted for our delivery of youth services. And so that will be an ongoing process that will take some time. But we would like to have that outside independent look of not just the facilities, but also our whole system of Division of Youth Services and how we deliver services, what gaps there are, and what we can do better. Thirdly, while we'll continue with DHS handling and delivery of services for our youth and managing the facilities, we will move to a bid solicitation for a private sector operator. This bid solicitation will most likely go out this December with the announcement of the winner or multiple winners in March of next year. And then the private sector will again take over the delivery of youth services in July of 2018. Fourthly, we look at how much money of general revenues is going to the Division of Youth Services. And while this money is important, it's justifiable as an appropriate expenditure of general revenue as our responsibility, we also wanted to look at whether we're leaving Medicaid dollars on the table. And part of the action items is a recommendation to utilize Medicaid funds to a greater extent on the delivery of youth services, both in the broader array of services that might be available through Medicaid, but also as a wise use of general revenue dollars and to maximize those in combination with Medicaid dollars that might be available. So those are some specific items that I've accepted from the report. I think these are good, will put us on the right path forward for the Division of Youth Services and for providing the services that are needed for our youth. And with that, I'll invite Director Gillespie to make any comments.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you. I just want to thank the Governor very much for accepting our recommendations. It has been a very busy 7.5 months since we began operating the facilities, a Christmas present that we were not expecting that changed our world. But as he said, it has led to a lot of work this year, a lot of changes, and a lot of positive action. I also want to take a moment and thank members of the legislature, a number of whom are here today, who have also been by our side over the last few months as we have begun really operating the facilities, looking at it, and figuring out how we would strengthen them and what we would be doing. So we appreciate that very, very much. As the Governor mentioned, in running the facilities, we did identify a number of areas that we felt needed to be strengthened. I'm going to ask Director Guman, who has led this effort internally and has been a very strong leader of the effort, to talk for a moment about those areas that we have worked to strengthen and how we'll be proceeding over the next few months. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will keep this short, as I know the Governor would like for me to do. I will speak very briefly to the 5 core areas we're going to be addressing. This report will be available to all of you after this meeting, so you'll have plenty of time to read it and talk with any of us as you want. The first area was behavioral health, and as he mentioned, when we took over the facilities, we found that the treatment services provided across the state were very different. And we were concerned about the focus on the youth. And so what we've done is work with the Division of Behavioral Health at DHS to contract for therapists to work on site in each of the facilities. So you've got a full-time person on site responsible for those 30 or so youth, managing their treatment plans and working with them. So that's a huge step in the right direction. The second was education services. When you've got a classroom with 20 teenage boys whose math levels may range from addition and algebra up higher, it's very difficult for teachers to teach to the whole range. So we're trying a new approach this year with Virtual Arkansas, which you'll hear more about. Almost all the high schools in Arkansas are using this, so it is tried and true and is an acceptable curriculum. So you'll hear more about that. Finance was the third area. Over 80% of our funding comes from general revenue, where a lot of the other divisions have more match and more federal money. This has been a historical problem and probably will be to a certain degree, because Corrections is something that it's very difficult to get Medicaid and some of the feds to support us. But we're working on that, so we look forward to that. And as we find ways to use Medicaid and other federal funding, we can increase our funding base. Fourth was family engagement, and this is one that's very dear to me. I think we all know that if you have a youth who's committed a crime, you take them out of their home, you bring them to us, we will help with anger management, behavior management, and all of those things. But if you put that youth back in the same family, the chances are not good for success. So we are going to focus on families from the day that a youth is committed to us. We'll have a caseworker out working with families. When the youth returns to the community, there'll be more intensive treatment there. And also, even on the front end, one of the things we've done across the board is working more closely with judges, saying to judges, what do you need in order to keep kids in your community and provide the support they need? And they all say more family services. We've got a person now in my central office who may be here as a family advocate. So she will be helping develop programs across the state in the facilities and at central office. And each of the facilities now has someone who's focusing on families. We recently had a family event day in each of the facilities where we invited families in for a day of celebration, and it was pretty amazing. The last area is very broad. It says programs and policies. We are looking at all our policies. Our facilities support ACA standards. That's what we're here to do. We need to make sure we're doing that, both in written policy and actual practice, so there will be a major policy initiative. And along those lines, looking at our community-based programs, at the same time we're looking at our residential, so that we are strengthening the services that judges have available to them to refer children and youth to, and when youth are coming back out of the facilities. So these are all things we knew we needed to work on. This plan brings it together and will hold us accountable in terms of action reports. The chair of Children and Youth, both chairs are here today. I'm sure they will be very interested in this and holding us accountable. Judiciary Committee is also another one that we welcome the opportunity to present these areas. How's that?
Great. Very well. Pieces, you. All right. With that, are there any questions?
Governor, on the effort to privatize the youth services, do we know the impact, the possible impact, potential impact in terms of jobs, in terms of synergies that will come about this? Have we done any study on that?
No, I think that remains to be seen. Obviously, it needs to be done within the constraints of our budget. Secondly, and I'll invite any other comments here, but you can have one operator for multiple facilities. You can have multiple operators for various facilities. So we'll see what's the best combination and what type of solicitation goes out. A lot of work has to go in that between now and this fall when that goes out, or late this fall. And so that remains to be seen. And while the independent review will be a little bit longer project, we might not get that into next March, I do expect that to help guide the future in terms of how we operate at DYS, the relationship with the contractors, and the broader range of services that are provided.
What makes you think there might be Medicaid dollars out there that are untouched?
Well, it's a matter of you're utilizing providers, and providers, if they're registered under Medicaid, can bill Medicaid for those provider bills if the individual qualifies for Medicaid. Most of the individuals that are within DYS custody do qualify for Medicaid.
Who will conduct the independent review?
That remains to be seen. That decision has not been made. I make a comparison that we'd like to have someone like a Paul Vincent, who is an expert in these arenas, but the actual individual or entity that will conduct that has not yet been determined.
I don't see anything in here that's explicitly talking about reducing the overall number of beds or reducing a reliance on confinement. More generally, I see it sort of implicitly talked about. Why is that not explicitly stated in here? And is that a goal of the overall plan for DYS moving forward?
Well, there is, as you see in the report, $2 million of innovation funds that can be utilized by courts, judges in more community-based services. So there is a reference to that, an interest in that, and obviously if we can provide services for our youth closer to home, closer to the community, then that is always the preference. But these takes judicial decisions. It's a judge that makes the decision as to where an individual will go, and that's the reason for these residential facilities. Well, there is a need for those, but whenever we can do it by community-based services, and that would be a preference when it works.
Do we know the impact to general revenue for fiscal 2017? What was the impact of the fiscal year ending June 30th?
Based upon the DHS delivery of services,
We were within budget.
we're within budget. We'd have to get that for you. I don't have that handy.
Last year. Are you asking about, SFY 17 just ended. Are you asking what our final spend was for SFY 17? We'll be happy to get you that. Yes, it was within the amount we had, but we will be glad to give it to you.
Yes.
It was discussed to strengthen community-based services and providers. Does that mean actually directing more money towards those providers versus facilities?
Well,
Go ahead.
this $2 million is an additional amount that's going to community services. As we build up our community services, then commitments should go down, and when they go down, then we can shift some money back to the community. So there is a goal in those areas to support that. And when we do an RFP for the community-based programs, the reducing confinement is going to be a big part of that.
Could you elaborate on that at all about, how would that be actually included in the RFP?
Well, that's one of the reasons we're going to take some time to develop whether it's an RFP or some other method of solicitation. We'll have to work with the Office of Procurement on that. But I think you can see from the action plan that this will be an emphasis of DYS working with the judges to have community-based options as a realistic consideration, and we have $2 million of innovation funds to accomplish that. Now, the solicitation that will go out to the private contractors is in reference to maintaining the existing facilities and to operate those. And so that's a separate issue. We'll see whether there needs to be any part of that referenced in the bid solicitation. All right, one more question. Was there?
I was going to ask, how did last year's issues surrounding the solicitation for the providers affect your future RFP process, or how will it affect it? Like what happened last year with all the protests and the confusion surrounding RFP? How will that affect?
Well, I think the lessons that we have learned, or what we're trying to improve upon, is the method in which the RFP goes out, or the bid solicitation, making sure that the terms are clear, making sure that the requirements are fair, and then secondly, whenever they are reviewed, to make sure the right panel is in place and that there's a clarity of understanding as to how the different bids would be scored. I think that's what the type of information that the legislature likes whenever they do a review. But as a chief executive, I want to make sure that it's a fair process, that it's open, but also that it has the ability to hold the contractors accountable. So that's the objective in it. So as to what changes and what we've learned, it's really more a matter of process more than anything else. Thank you all for your attention to this today. Again, we'll express my thanks to the General Assembly here and for the great work of DYS and the leaders at DHS and all those that serve the important mission of our youth. Thank you.